And now, Commercialization Federal Technology Panel Discussion.
Good morning, Impact Week participants. It's such a pleasure to have you with us this morning. I am particularly excited about this panel. I'm Scott Korndike from the Entrepreneur Center. And as you know, the Entrepreneur Center engages in commercialization and innovation every day. That's what we do. And so we love entrepreneurs and we love innovators. And I am thrilled to be joined by two great examples of that. Gentlemen who don't live in our region, don't live in Ohio, but are adding real value to the overall innovation ecosystem. And they also don't work with AFRL necessarily. So this is a real treat for us. We get to work with entrepreneurs who innovate around AFRL a lot. We don't get to spend as much time with innovators who work with other laboratories. And so I am thrilled to be joined by Earl Cole and Tim Burby. Tim, Earl, welcome. We're going to start with just introduction. So I'm going to start with you, Tim. Would you please introduce yourself to the Impact Week audience?
You bet. Thanks so much, Scott. My name's Tim Burby. I'm the president of Blue Shift Materials. I've been in materials science for getting on 30 years now, but I am not a material scientist. So my background is finance. I graduated from the University of Texas in Austin, so I'm a diehard Longhorn, and studied finance there. And then I got my master's at Columbia University in New York. I never really thought of myself as an entrepreneur early in my career, and was working for large conglomerates, and had some success with being on the other side and helping young companies grow, and really love the energy around that. And sometimes big companies get bureaucratic and you get bogged down, and so I began to get enticed about starting something on my own. Was really fortunate the way things panned out for me, and I'll share more of that today. And so we started Blue Shift almost 7 years ago, and we have, I think, done a really nice job of making that transition to commercialization. So I'll share as much as I can today, and I'm thrilled to be here with you this afternoon. It's afternoon where I am in Central Connecticut.
Thanks, Tim. Earl, would you please introduce yourself to the audience?
Sure. My name is Earl Cole. I'm the CEO of the Smart Tire Company. And unlike Tim, we are actually brand new. So we started the company just 2 months ago. We are headquartered here in Los Angeles, California. So it's early morning here, but I'm okay. Got my coffee. I'm ready to go. My background is actually pretty diverse. I would say I'm mainly a business executive, but I've been a serial entrepreneur for about 20 years. I've worked at Disney and Sony and Fox, so I have that media background, but I've also worked as internships at Microsoft and Amazon, so I have a tech background as well. So it's been an interesting journey so far. I guess we'll get into that later about our particular journey so far in the first 2 months, which has been very, very much an adventure. So glad to be here today to share my entrepreneurial experience and just learn more, even from Tim, who's been doing this for about 5 years with his company, to hopefully we can go on a similar journey of success as well. So thank you for having me.
Absolutely. And really, this session is all about that. It is really about the learning. We wanted to really focus this session on two great entrepreneurs who are walking this commercialization journey, and specifically walking a journey where they're commercializing a technology from a government lab. And so obviously we got to dig in a little bit around your technology. Now, commercialization is really the critical process for the DoD to ultimately acquire capabilities. We said on a number of sessions this week, it's all about the warfighter, getting technology to the warfighter faster. So I'd like to talk about that journey for each of you a little bit. So we'll start with you, Tim. Can you give us a sense of kind of where your relationship with that federal lab began and how you're thinking about your technology now in light of that interrelationship with, in your case, I think it's NASA, right?
You're on mute.
Tim, I think you got
muted. Pardon me. I'm trying. I'm trying to be so polite and mute while I'm not speaking. I forget to unmute myself. Thanks, Scott. Excited to talk about our experience. And I forgot in my introduction to share that I'm the son of an Air Force pilot. He proudly served for 20 years, and so it's a real honor for me to be a part of this this week. So our interactions with the U.S. government and specifically NASA started before we actually became a company, because they were really the groundbreaking force behind the kind of the core ecosystem of technology that Blue Shift got into, and it was market driven. So in my previous life, I worked with a lot of the same type of customers I am now, and they were looking for a specific type of material. NASA had some real good core technology around making small amounts of it in the lab. And that's what kind of piqued our interest to this area. Specifically, it's around a polymer aerogel, and the polymer is polyimide. And the Glenn Research Center up in Ohio is really at the forefront of that technology from maybe 10 years ago or so. And what we recognized pretty quickly was that there seemed to be some value if somebody could commercialize that technology. And so we, from several different touch points, actually had communications with NASA. And I think that's super important to broaden your team as soon as possible and use your network as frequently as you can to have many touch points. Because people change within these organizations, and having many touch points just improves the process over time. And so we, began a relationship. And I think what's really interesting is where we are today with the technology we licensed was not what we were really originally negotiating and talking about. So it morphed into what we're doing now, which is licensing a technology around using a NASA application for RF antennas. It's really a new way of designing them. And so Blue Shift makes a raw material, polyimide aerogels, that go into that application. And NASA had written a pretty elegant paper for this type of subject matter, describing how the product could be used for antennas in the future. And these are antennas that could be used on really any air structure. And we felt strongly about the potential of the market and the real core technology. And so we decided to go for it, which then turned into the massive job of trying to figure out how to make the material at scale.
Super interesting. And so you mentioned, Tim, that you're not actually utilizing the technology that you first set out to license, but you utilize the relationship to ultimately build your business, right? The relationship with NASA was formative in helping you build your business. You thought you were going down the path for one technology, but you actually went down another.
Yes, and so many great lessons, I think in this general topic area, the famous saying of fail fast. We started off on a mission and we hit several roadblocks, and then we had to pivot, and we pivoted, I think, successfully to really develop a lot of our own IP, but keep that relationship with NASA to leverage all the work they had done on the application side. I think that was a nice way to come to I was going to say the conclusion. We are not at any conclusion yet, but certainly helped us move the ball down the field.
But a really important point. I think you identified something really important in that sometimes you think of a relationship with a government lab as I'm going to go pluck a piece of technology. And what you don't understand is the capabilities and the complementary nature of those relationships and how they can actually help you in ways just beyond delivering a specific piece of technology or a set of technologies. I think it's a fascinating point. So Earl, I know you're kind of at, as you said earlier, kind of a different end of that spectrum. You're kind of right in the midst of it. You just began this journey. So I know we're really interested to hear about how kind of your relationship with a federal lab started. Kind of where did you begin? And ultimately, kind of where are you taking your technology?
Sure, yeah. We actually began with an accelerator program called FedTech. So NASA actually sponsored the program. It just ended this summer. And so what FedTech is, it brings entrepreneurs and students and different people with different backgrounds an opportunity to work with NASA on actually doing some type of customer discovery, picking what kind of technology you might want to work with. And immediately, when me and my co-founder, we saw this particular tire, this super elastic tire. We found it very, very interesting and fascinating. It was something that they used for the moon, future Mars project. So we were drawn to this particular product. And so we went through the program with FedTech, which is a great program because it gives you that introduction to NASA. It teaches you about their tech transfer program, which I didn't even know existed. And I've been an entrepreneur for a while. Say, oh, you mean you can actually license this stuff that easily for the common person? I thought you had to be a scientist or some type of a doctor or research person. Um, so we finished the program. We did really well. We won the pitch day on the final event. So that kind of elevated our status a little bit. And which I tell every entrepreneur, if you are thinking of working with any government lab, in particular NASA, make sure you do your own research. Research, learn as much about the technology as possible, ask all the right questions. The benefit we had with starting off in that program, we got to know the inventors, and they actually had a certain protocol in place to help us with the actual transfer of the technology. So we talked to a licensing expert, which helped us put together our application to NASA. And so you go through all these different steps, but again, do the research because NASA's not going to do that for you. Understand business. You can be, a high level PhD, but it does not mean you understand how to be an entrepreneur or start a business. Commercialization is a very, very complicated thing. So you have to really think for the masses, and it's not just doing simple research. So fortunately, my background was in mass communication and advertising and marketing. I've worked at big advertising agencies. I worked on Honda. So of course, working for a car company gives me certain insights on how to apply this particular tire technology to the mass market. And so another thing I'll say, with our journey, you have to be very, very patient when you're dealing with government. It does not operate at the speed of commercialization or the outside business world where things are very quick, especially when you're a startup. You have to be very nimble. Like Tim said, you got to pivot here, pivot there sometimes. A big entity like NASA will take their time. It's a lot of different steps they have to go through to give you those certain approvals because it's their brand, it's their technology, it's a big deal. So my advice to entrepreneurs is while you're waiting on NASA, start planning, doing all the strategy work. Again, do the research. I can't stress that enough. Your own research. I mean, Google everything possible and stay in contact with those inventors as much as you can. So we are on our third month of this, and we officially do have the license, so that's great. But there's so much more we have to do, and 9 times out of 10, these technologies that you license are not market ready. So you cannot think like, oh, this is great. I'm going to just go straight and get a website and start this company. Like, no, lots of R&D, lots of everything. Tim, I don't know what all you went through with that part, but the pictures look great for NASA when we saw it, and then we was like, wait, you mean we have to do all this other stuff before it goes to the market? So be prepared for something like that. A lot of R&D.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you, Earl. I think that there's so much to unpack in kind of what both of you have been talking about. And so we'll pick it apart a little bit. And just, Tim, I would love to hear. Earl talked about his accelerator experience and a very specific accelerator within NASA looking at NASA technology. For those in the audience, there are accelerators and programs all over the place. Clearly, we're very familiar as a region with AFWorks, with some of the cyber programming from the Air Force. Increasingly, the Navy and the Army Futures Command, for example, are doing things in this space where they're focused on accelerating technologies. So definitely look for those kind of opportunities, as Earl mentioned. But Tim, did you have any assistance as you were beginning? Did you have any kind of programs you participated in, or any support structures that you utilized to kind of get off the ground?
Yeah, big time. I love the word ecosystem to describe the opportunities when you work with somebody like a NASA. So we have I think a lot of different pieces to the ecosystem that we are able to leverage. A really huge one for us was being able to rent some wet labs at Texas State. They have a facility called Star Park, which I mean, these were pristine, beautiful wet labs that were just ready for us to move into. We really lucked out in a way, because we stumbled upon them when we were looking to build our own. And when you get into an ecosystem like we'll call it sub ecosystem at Texas State, then you're able to get interns. They had a variety of U.S. Government officials that would parade through that we could do presentations to. So the DoD did visit. Some of the different incubators that have been started by the Defense Department would come by. We'd be able to make presentations, and the equipment we're able to use. If you go to Star Park's website now, they have us on there as a graduate. So I think it's a wonderful thing that's developed around the country, where companies can get help, and then the companies can also give back a little bit to the incubators. So that's just one example of us being able to get physical CapEx help without having to spend much money immediately, also without the risk. When we were talking with our investors about building sites and building our own labs, and you talk to the landlords, they want a 10-year commitments. It really, the dollars and just the risk of the dollars adds up. So I really feel that was a huge break for us to get where we're able to go.
So I made Tim answer that way, since those of you who know me know that we run an incubator and we have that kind of space. So I made Tim answer that way so that he would do a commercial for us.
Not true.
No, I think that's so important. Those incubator accelerator resources are so important.
Yeah.
And I think Tim makes a great point too, that the DoD and Earl, the DoD, through all kinds of different vehicles, does provide access and opportunity to engage. And so you've heard both of these great entrepreneurs talk about that opportunity. I want to spin back into something you said, Earl, and I'd love your thoughts too, Tim. Earl, you talked about market research and really doing the work to really build your business at the same time you're building your technology. And I think that is so important. That's such an important thread to pull in thinking about from a startup perspective, especially when you're licensing a technology. You're not only developing a technology, but more importantly, you're building a business. Can you talk about kind of how you've approached, I know it's early, but how you're approaching that challenge, right? You're building out a technology, but at the same time, you're building a business. How are you grappling with that?
It's a careful balance, because again, information is slowly coming to us from NASA about the technology, because there's certain patents and things like that in place that might be even pending. So we're getting information, here and there. So while you're getting the information on how to continue to develop your technology, you have to have an infrastructure in place for the business. So once that tech is ready, you need to be able to place it right here in the program you have set up, where it's like, okay, if you have R&D partnerships already set up, if you have a full 5-year plan already put together, I mean, there's certain things you got to have together as an entrepreneur that's ready for the technology to become a business, so you can scale it or do whatever you are, depending on the level of that particular technology. So I would say, again, just keep getting as much information as possible. Take advantage of accelerators and other programs, grants. A lot of people go through programs and they don't ask the right questions. So you can't ask the right questions if you don't continue to learn and do the research and utilize the mentors and advisors that might be a part of that program, whether it's DoD or NASA or any other type of program. So again, that's what helped us, is asking all the right questions, putting it all together. Obviously, having our own entrepreneurial experience helped, because the difference with working with a technology from NASA and some of the things I've done in the past, which is like a software app, night and day. So those with entrepreneur backgrounds and they've worked on an app or they've worked on some type of social media thing, it's a completely different ball game when you're dealing with hard tech and an actual tangible product. So where there's upfront cost, there's other things you got to do with R&D, as I said. So you have to make sure you're competent for the technology you're going to be working with. So we couldn't license this technology and try to do an app for an iPhone. You know, it just wouldn't make any sense. You got to actually make sure you understand what direction your technology is going to go in. And again, that's utilizing what these accelerators and even public information that's out there. There are webinars, there's all kinds of things that are on different websites provided by the government to help you with transferring this technology. Help you with how to get a grant. You know, you just have to read and do the work. And I was in the middle of a doctorate program with USC, and it became so overwhelming dealing with this that I actually had to leave the program. You know, so that is my commitment.
That's impressive.
To this particular thing, is dropping out of a doctorate program because I'm so passionate about what we're doing. And so you have to have that passion as well.
That's super cool. Tim, again, you've got a few years where you've had the experience of kind of watching your company unfold. To what extent did you really use that formative market research, and how did you use that research to kind of drive the direction of your company?
Yeah, I can't overemphasize. It's so critical to do the research, because and everything changes. And I like how Earl said we're in hard tech, and I think with hard tech you got to have another level of patience and anticipation. And the anticipation part is really hard. It's hard to be patient, and we have to say, okay, the market is doing X, Y, Z, but what are they going to be doing in 3 years when our product's ready?
Yeah.
So
Sure.
We've tried to stay really in connection with all these different research groups that are out there that do all these reports and trade shows, and it's become a nice collaboration where they'll interview us and talk to us about the market, and we'll spend a couple of nickels to buy the reports. But it's so important to understand the macro environment, and you can do that, I think, just by studying the reports and what's online, and then having connections at customers and partners where you can verify the information. So those industry reports you can purchase have some good information, but certainly you have to read them with a grain of salt.
Sure.
Yeah.
So you both talked about the power of partnerships. You both made reference to the fact that those partnerships are critically important. Earl, again, you're early in the process, but you touched on it directly. Talk to me about kind of your strategy for partnerships. You're not going to do everything, right? You're going to need to work with other people. How do you approach those relationships?
Yeah, you're going to have to find other experts. Obviously, we're working with a complicated technology. I'm not an engineer, I'm not a scientist, I'm an entrepreneur and a business person, but you have to surround yourself with experts, whether that's getting people on your advisory board or trying to partner up with an entity that's related or can benefit from your technology. So you have to approach these different companies and entities. I mean, I won't name names, but there's very large entities that we have to speak with to introduce our technology, because we're an early stage startup. Unlike Tim, we don't have any money. So we're like, hey, we have this great technology. It might benefit your bottom line in 5 years. How does that sound?
Right.
So finding the right wording and the right timing to get someone interested in investing in your company early, whether it's money or just investing their time and interest, a letter of intent or something that you can just run with. So it's important to find, when you're in the early stages, some type of partner. It's not easy, but somebody, an entity that can benefit from that technology, try to sell them on that. I think that's an important stage to go through, and it takes a while, but you have the time because you're still waiting on certain things from NASA. Yeah. Which is understandable. So you have to always be doing that balance. So when you're waiting on one particular thing, make sure you're doing something else. If you're waiting on this thing, make sure you're doing something else on your end.
Yep. Yep. Tim, how about you? Strategic partnerships important in your development as well?
1000%. Yeah. And what's interesting, I think, is Earl mentioned, there's a lot of large companies, obviously, in his markets, and he's going to need to create relationships. We are working with enormous companies on the customer side, and there's lots and lots of big plastics companies that want to talk to us all the time, and both of these types of groupings, we have deep relationships, but it's so critical to find the guy or gal who's going to be the champion for you and actually, execute stuff. Mm-hmm. And that takes time. So, you got to be comfortable with having a lot of conversations and people being interested but not sure, what to do or how to move the project forward. But over time, every company's got one, and it's just a matter of finding them. You got to find that champion to do the letter of intent, to buy some samples. It's really important for all stakeholders to see that, somebody's actually going to pay for what you're offering. And it helps a lot if it's, a brand name.
Tim, have you sought or are you seeking venture capital, external capital?
We got a strategic investor pretty early on. It's a company called Flexcon. They have a holdings group, so Flexcon Holdings. And they were a strategic partner, non-financial at the very beginning, because they were helping us with the manufacturing part of our product. And we were very attracted to not going with venture capital or private equity because they're material scientists, they're patient money, and it's strategic for them. So there's a lot of collaboration with actual making of the product. So we are well funded, and as of now, we are not seeking additional funding.
Excellent, good advice. Earl, how about you? I know again you're early, but what's the funding path look like for you?
I can say, Tim, I'm so jealous that you were well funded in the early stages. Because I have experience in startups, I am very, very comfortable being uncomfortable at this stage. So you have to use that to just stay hungry and try to find the financial path. And it has to be a multi-pronged attack. It can't be just venture capital. It might be an angel investor. It might be SBIR with government grants, academia. You try all kinds of things to see what's going to fit with your path to that particular funding. So we are trying all different type of things. Yes, we're in talks with certain people and certain companies, and so we're going to wait and see how all that comes to fruition over the next few weeks. But until then, we got to continue, developing our relationship with NASA, keep getting information, just keep putting things in place to be prepared for the funding. Because sometimes people get funded and they don't even know what to do. Like, okay, what are you going to spend the money on? You actually have to know what you need if you get money. If I gave you $1 million, well, what are you going to do with it? Well, we're going to build. No, they need to know specifically every dollar. What do you need? And so you have to be able to break that down. So again, that's all the research. Like Tim said, maybe getting certain market reports, Google everything and ask a lot of questions. That will lead to money.
Great advice. Great advice. And I wanted to kind of start the conversation around funding from a venture perspective, because I know the background of each of you, and I wanted to kind of bring that point out to the audience. So, strategic investors are tremendously powerful. Venture investors bring an additional or a different kind of influence, power, capital, right? But you touched on it in, I think, an important way, Earl. You talked about SBIR funding, grant funding, right? What's the path look like for you as a really early stage company in working with NASA for example, some SBIR funding? Or maybe there's other places that you can find some of that early stage non-dilutive capital. Is that kind of on your development plan?
Yeah, non-dilutive always sounds fantastic. You go the VC route, they're trying to take it all. They'll
Yeah.
try to leave you a little, but they want to take it all if they can.
Mhm.
You want to hang on to as much equity as possible. So the the SBIRs and any type of government grant, they're not asking any money from you. They're not asking for any equity. They just want to help you, and you can develop the product. The good thing about working with the government technology is, you know, they don't have any skin in the game as far as wanting to take from you. They want to commercialize the product to give it to the world. Um, that's the difference between, trying to build something, on your own and working with VCs. VCs can be great, obviously, if you have the right partner. And I tell, I do other talks that, be careful who you take money from. Not all money is good money. You got to make sure that your things are aligned with how you see the company and the vision and things like that. So you can't just go take money from anybody just because, oh, that's a cool tech, here's some money. No, you're married to that person now. You're married to that VC now. So be careful who you marry.
Yeah, such a good advice. We
Yeah.
always tell people that if you're going to take the money, make sure the money is the least of what they can offer,
Hmm.
because it's the relationships, as you said, it's the linkage to potential customers. Now, Tim, you had the strategic partner. And so instead of the venture organization, which I think Earl quite rightly says wants you to drive really hard and they want big returns, strategic partners sometimes do. You said earlier you had a little bit more of a patient strategic partner, but should any of our audience members find themselves pursuing a strategic partnership, what kind of expectations or what kind of advice would you give them as they use strategic partnerships to try to commercialize technology?
I think communication solves a lot of issues with investors and stakeholders. So we have really frequent communications, and really try to manage those in a professional way. So we have board of directors, we have board of directors meetings, and we are by no means given a blank check and said, okay, come back in 5 years and tell us how it went. It's very systematic in our budget setting, um, and then we'll get funded for a certain amount of time, and then we got to hit milestones. So it's a constant game of proving yourself and showing that you're making progress. I think there's a lot of similarities, working within a large company or with financial investors. I think a real key advantage to me with going the strategic investor route is there's no exit plan on their books, at the beginning, so they don't have any pressure from their investor base. It's really they're looking at, well, how can this technology add value to our overall corporate plan for the next 10 to 20 years? As long as they can see a pathway to that, then I think it's a healthy way to do it.
That's great. And you talked about reporting, and that's a subject that I wanted to shift briefly to. Um, when you interact with the government agency and you've created a license, what kind of reporting do you do, or what kind of ongoing engagements do you have once that license is done? Do you still talk regularly? Do you report to them? Obviously, if you've got royalties or you need to report, or sales you may need to report, but what kind of ongoing interactions do you have, Tim, with NASA?
Well, we do have responsibilities we have to fulfill in the agreement, which includes, doing an annual report, and spelling out not just, what we've done in the past 12 months, but what our strategy is moving forward to grow the technology. But we also have I think, a really good relationship, personally. And then what we love about working with NASA is, the branding and the marketing opportunities and trade shows. So, in the early days, I went to a trade show and there was NASA and they had samples of our product. It was really awesome. So, I really like working with a government entity, in the licensing of their technology, because I do think the spirit of their engagement is really healthy and rich, and that they want us to succeed. They've got other pieces, to NASA that can really help us, and marketing, all the social media stuff. Um, so I think, yeah, we've got the kind of the mundane task of, all right, we got to write that report, and it's really not, to me, it's pretty light lifting. But really, where I think we have a responsibility to NASA and the inventors of that technology is to share with them what our strategy is moving forward, and then try to work with the entire NASA group, not just Glenn, but other entities, and then try to leverage their marketing prowess as well.
Really interesting. All right, so Earl, I got just a slightly different question for you, because you talked about, as part of your accelerator, getting a chance to meet inventors and getting a chance to meet, really technical people. To the extent you're engaged in it right now, how do you manage kind of driving research milestones with those inventors that aren't necessarily business focused? So you got to, at the end of the day, build a great business. You're not in it for the science. You're not in it for the technology as much as you are to build a great business. But some of those inventors and some of those partners may have a much more specific focus on the technology. How do you manage that?
Well, fortunately for me, I love the science. I love the technology. I love the NASA brand, the story. So I was already like a NASA nerd anyway.
Mhm.
So this was like a dream thing to actually be a part of. And so we have regular communication with the inventors and NASA, and you keep it friendly and just open conversation as much as possible. There's a lot of encrypted conversations as well, where you just got to kind of guess what they kind of mean with something. But it's important. And I do want to say something. I would touch on what Tim was saying about milestones. It's important that if you are interested in licensing a technology from NASA, when you do your application, be very specific and realistic about your milestones. Don't just say like, yeah, we're going to go to market in 1 year, and it's really going to take you 6. Be very, conservative on, what your milestones are going to be, so you can actually hit them. Because if you keep hitting those milestones, certain things will keep happening for you in a good way. If you keep missing milestones, next thing you know, you're going to be trying to reach NASA, and they're not getting back to you for like 2 or 3 weeks, or you just want to keep that good, healthy relationship and keep hitting those milestones and that mark, so you can keep that communication going, keep getting information on how to keep developing your product, or I'll say the technology. So that is a piece of advice I just want to tell anybody that's looking into that. Make sure you are realistic with your milestones when you put on your application, because once you do that and you get the agreement, they are strictly going to hold you to that, what you said.
Yep. Well, it's good advice in general, right? Because certainly NASA or your government partner is going to look at those milestones. But God bless you if you put milestones in front of your venture partner or your strategic partner and you miss those milestones, right?
Exactly.
That's can be a very painful experience, very painful experience. So we've got just about 5 minutes left. And one thing that I really want to talk to you guys about is kind of, what advice do you have for folks that are sitting in our virtual audience, looking at you and saying, you guys have been there, you're doing it, right? You're building great companies, and you started from this foundation of a piece of government research. Whether you ended there, in Tim's case, you sort of pivoted. Earl, you're still focused on that technology. You're building businesses, and you're utilizing these technologies that you got from somebody else's head, right? You licensed from a federal research institution. So just give me a quick sense. I'll start with you, Tim. Kind of what was that experience like? And for those sitting in the audience, kind of what should they be prepared for? Earl touched on pace, and I think that's an important point. But from your perspective, what ought the audience know about that experience of licensing a federal piece of technology?
It's manageable. One of my favorite new words, it's not a new word, but a word that I've been using more recently is cadence. It's so important to keep a cadence. I think working with the government, it's appropriate to think about, all right, every month I need to just touch base. Let's make sure we're moving forward. And, that communication with that champion within the government agency, we've had a good champion at NASA, and they can kind of tell you, all right, here's where we are in the process. I don't want to throw lawyers under the bus, but sometimes lawyers hold stuff up.
Careful. I'm a lawyer. Be careful.
It's their job. They're doing what they're supposed to, so it's healthy. I like to say you got to have a company that's got a good engine, but you've also got to have good brakes. So, I think cadence, it's manageable, and you just go. So you could never be the one holding it up. There's going to be so many other pieces to the pie that hold you up, so it cannot be you. So you go.
That's good. Earl, I know you're fresh off it, so you've got real recent experience. What was your experience like?
Experience with
licensing, the license process.
Oh, I had a great experience with licensing the technology. I mean, it was pretty straightforward. Again, we did the research to make sure you're very competent on, the things you say in your application, and then just be friendly and nice and love the technology. Don't license something that you are halfway in. Be all the way in, be passionate about that particular technology, because it shows when you really love the technology you're working with. It shows when you talk about it to investors, to potential partners. So you have to really love it and don't come from it from just a plain academic or just scientific, but have the passion. When you're an entrepreneur, you have to have that kind of passion. It has to show, and that makes you dive deep into the technology. We don't always have access to NASA and the inventors, so we find out things on our own. So I can't stress enough this research thing. Like, you have to. It's like a real 9-to-5 job. You're researching, you're learning, you're putting things in place, and so having that competency that comes with that is how you can have a good relationship with NASA, because they're not going to want to talk to you if you don't know what you're talking about. So have the business idea, have the business plan, have the strategy in place, have everything, and hit those milestones the best you can, the realistic milestones. This is the particular technology we're working with is something that was on the moon and is going to Mars. How do you explain that to people that, hey, this can work for Earth? So you have to understand that and have to communicate that. So sure. Yeah, communication is key too. Yeah.
Sure. That makes sense. All right. So last question for each of you, and I'll start with you, Tim. If you had to talk to a younger version of yourself, right, at the beginning of this process, what one piece of advice would you give yourself as you're thinking about going down this path of taking a technology to market? What one piece of advice would you give yourself?
Invest more, I think. Sometimes we're too careful. I think, if you got the macro perspective and you feel it's healthy and it's ripe, like, I love the direction we're going with antennas and RF communications, the 5G infrastructure, all that's really good. And then, as Earl was really touching on, gotta love the technology, the core. What are we talking about every day, 8 hours a day? And so if those two pieces are there, I mean, yeah, I wish I would have gone a little bit even heavier on the investment earlier.
That's great. Earl, what about you?
Yeah, I'm going to touch on that love. Like, even don't just fall in love with the technology. You have to fall in love with the problem, the solutions, that part of it as well. So as much as you can love the technology, which you should love it, make sure that you're not trying to put square pegs in round holes. Like, make sure that you find the appropriate application for that technology. So understand that, like, it's we can all get caught up in, like, wow, this wonderful, fantastic NASA technology, and it's really cool, it sounds cool, but you still got to do the work. You still got to make it happen. You still got to commercialize this thing. Commercializing is different from just licensing it. Okay, we got the license, now what? So make sure you understand the business steps and needs for this to actually be commercialized, because the end goal is for this to go to market. That is the end goal. Keep your eyes on the actual end goal.
A beautiful way to end our discussion. Our end goal was to be on time. Our end goal was to hopefully put a lot of really great information out there for our audience to hear. I got to tell you guys, we get a chance to work with entrepreneurs and inventors every day, and you guys are two great examples of super smart, super energetic, super bright people. We so appreciate your time. We so appreciate your willingness to spend time with us. We look forward to watching both of your companies as you progress. And certainly, on behalf of all of us, thanks for participating in Impact Week 2020. And thank you, WBI, for hosting us. I hope you all have a wonderful holiday. Be safe, stay healthy, and hopefully we'll catch up with you all soon.
Thank you so much.
Thank you very much. Really
All right.
enjoyed it.
Take care, everybody.